when Britain became Roman, the Britons gained access to the finest goods the empire could offer. The Roman economy was fueled by trade, but they had trouble meeting the demand for luxury goods like jewellery.
What they needed was the raw materials, the ores, and that is one of the principal reasons why the Romans came to Britain and stayed here for 400 years.
But this trade would have been impossible without their amazing network of roads.
This is Richborough, near Dover, and it was here that the Romans first landed to conquer Britain in AD 43. At first, they secured the site with great defensive ditches, but quickly it developed to become Portus Rutupii, a major port and supply depot, and the first gateway to the new province of Britain. The port soon developed into a bustling town with shops, temples, and even an amphitheatre for entertainment. And because of its delicious oysters, the town became famous throughout the empire. Right on the quayside, they built the most fantastic structure. It was a huge triumphal arch. It was 25 metres high, so anyone standing on the ground would only have come up to about here. It was made of white marble, very much like the Marble Arch in London, except the whole thing was covered with bronze statues. Everyone who came ashore would have had to walk through here, and it must have been a very powerful reminder of who was in charge of this new province. Every day, shiploads of troops and supplies arrived, and the first priority was to get them out to the front line. So this was where the Roman engineers started. The first Roman road in Britain was built right through the arch and straight off there to Canterbury.
The first road led to the city they built as their capital, London. From there it went to St Albans and onward to the army camps on the northern frontier. And 2,000 years later, it's still one of the major freight routes across England. We don't know what the Romans called it, but the Saxon name was Watling Street, and today it's the A2 and the A5. The most obvious thing about Roman roads is that they're straight. But what amazed me is that even when they couldn't see where they were heading, they somehow managed to set off in precisely the right direction. A perfect example of this is Stane Street, which the Romans began building in London. They set off in exactly the right direction for Chichester, 65 miles away, even though the North and South Downs completely blocked the view. But the Romans had an ingenious method of surveying the route before they started to build.
Here I am at London, what they called Londinium, and I know that Chichester, Novio Magus, is somewhere over there beyond the sand dunes on the beach. You understand I'm using these sand dunes as a sort of model for the whole of the south of England. So I'm going to light a beacon here and then set off in roughly the right direction. But I can't see all the way to Chichester, I don't know where it is. So what I'm going to do is to head for a high point there, which is roughly on the line, and then I'll start again. So first, light the beacon. There she goes. Now gather up my other beacons and off I go to the high point. Now, this is the highest point for some distance, which is a great thing for two reasons. First of all, if there were any Celts sneaking up on me to attack, I'd be able to see them. I'd be able to defend myself up here, so it's a good place to be anyway. And the second reason is that I can see a long way. I can easily see London over there, where I've just lit a beacon, and I can see the sea. I can't see Chichester yet. It must be just behind that next row of sand dunes. But what I can see is another hill more or less exactly in line, so that's my next target. So all I need to do is to stick my beacon here in the ground and light it, and then I can set off for the next hill. That's the highest point. Put the beacon in, easily see the last of there! Hey, there's Chichester, Novia Magus.
Because I couldn't see Chichester until now, I've had to choose high points in roughly the right direction. With hills in the way, I still can't see whether all my beacons are in a straight line, but the Romans had an answer. And this is it. This is my secret weapon, a Roman groma. Now this was actually what every surveyor would carry with him in the field. It was essentially his badge of office. Let me show you how it works. It's really a beautiful and very simple piece of equipment. There's a stick that you stick in the ground and a cross on top here, which is two bits at right angles. And from each end there's a string hanging with a weight on the end, which is just a plumb bob, so that all four strings hang absolutely vertically. Now, for this simple job, I just want to make a straight line between Chichester down there and London over here. So I'm going to line this up on Chichester by sighting along the strings. I can see the strings swinging each way and the flame just between them. It's a shade more like that. That's it. Now the question is, are these two beacons lined up on the previous one that I put up there? So what I do is I walk round without touching it, and I sight along the same two strings in the opposite direction. What a pity. Obviously, we're not quite in a straight line, and I need to go back and move that beacon about, I guess it's about 20 yards to the left. So, here we go. Using my groma, I can adjust the position of the beacon until it's in line with the ones ahead and behind. So I can line up 3 beacons at once, but never all 4. It's then a case of adjusting and readjusting each beacon in turn until they're all lined up. Now I've got all 4 beacons in a dead straight line. London, 2 on the hills and Chichester. But it has taken me an enormous amount of walking backwards and forwards through all those sand dunes. And I reckon the Romans must have been more efficient about it. They would have had a surveyor on each hill. So there'd be one chap standing by each beacon, and they could then have lined themselves up automatically once they saw the other beacons going up. And they would keep moving a little bit with their own gromas, and eventually they'd all be lined up, and I would never have had to move. That must be better. So in order to lay out the exact path of the road, I've got myself a minion to put the canes in. So off you go. I'll just line up my groma in the right direction. Dexter, shade more. Okay, hold it there. Dexter, that's good. Bonus. The road engineers weren't complete slaves to the straight line, though. Across a steep hill or a difficult river crossing, they'd take a sharp diversion. On surviving Roman roads like Stane Street, you can still see these angled doglegs, but you'll never find a curve. Working alone with a single groma, it took me all day to mark out a dead straight line of about 150 metres over the sand dunes. The Romans were a lot faster, but they had plenty of practice. Their road engineers averaged a mile of road every 3 or 4 days. In the 1st century AD, in Britain alone, they built over 10,000 miles of roads. That's nearly 3 times longer than all of today's motorways. The roads were originally built for marching soldiers. Many of their foundations remain, and in some cases have been resurfaced only half a dozen times in 2,000 years, yet they're still the arteries of Britain. In just a few places, the Roman construction is still intact, if a little overgrown. By looking at these, we can get an idea of how they were built. Underneath this grassy bank is a genuine Roman road, still intact after almost 2,000 years. It's called Ackling Dyke, and it led from the little settlements in the south to the major town of Salisbury, way up north. This particular area is full of Iron Age burial mounds, like this one behind me. And the Romans paid no attention to those at all. They simply drove the road straight, through the middle of them. So, as well as having an important road, they were also making a powerful political statement.
The most impressive thing about this road is this huge bank, the Agger, 2 metres high, on top of which they actually built the road surface. Now, I'd like to show you the construction of this road, but unfortunately it's a listed monument, so I can't dig it up, and I'm going to have to make my own.
First, they'd dig ditches on either side of the road to act as drains. The foundations were often made from huge flat boulders. And onto these, the Agger was built, a bank of gravel, chalk or sand, packed in thin layers to as high as 2 metres. Next, the edges of the road were marked with stout curbstones, before the surface was covered with flat stones laid carefully together like crazy paving. And on top, a layer of fine gravel was packed down over the stone and rolled flat to give a smooth, all-weather surface, perfect for the marching feet of the legionaries. The road network became an integral part of the Roman administration of Britain because the governors used the roads to help calculate their taxes.
Taxes were levied on every landowner according to the size of the farm or the estate. So it was vital for the Romans to know exactly how much land everyone owned.
For the first time ever, this northwestern corner of the empire was crisscrossed by a grid of roads. And this grid was used as a reference to work out the area of every landowner's property.
So the key to accurate determination of the taxes was accurate measurement of the roads. We know that Roman roads had milestones. Every mile along the road they put a huge great carved block of stone with the names of the road builders and information for travellers all carved on it. But the question is, how did they know where to put the milestones? The Roman mile was 1,000 paces. In Latin, milli passuum, and we get our word mile from the Latin. So what they had to do was to measure 1,000 paces. Now, there was an official pacing stick, and this is it. And from one end to the other is an official Roman pace. And I'm going to make it easier by tying my shoelaces together. You'll notice that this is not 1 step, but 2 steps. So 1, 2, and that's exactly 1 pace. Right. Down this path between the trees to the end is just about half a mile. So I reckon if I go there and back, I should do just about 1,000 paces. And I'll start here at my post. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 on 6, 2 on 7, 2 on 333, 334, 99, 300, 400, 731, 789, 1,000! That is 1 Roman mile.
This may seem like a silly method for measuring out miles of roads, but we know that the Greek army had specially trained pacing soldiers. The Romans, however, had a rather more precise, mechanical way to do the job. This is an odometer. We've built it from a description of the 1st century BC by Vitruvius, the great writer on Roman science. It works in much the same way as its modern successor, the taximeter. Vitruvius's machine counted each mile by dropping a pebble into a tin. Its mechanism had a series of gears, just like a clock, but designed to count feet, paces and miles rather than seconds, minutes and hours. The road wheels are exactly 4 feet across. That means they turn 400 times every mile. The wheels connect to a large central cog with 400 teeth, which completes 1 full turn every mile. It's driven by a nail on the axle. In turn, this cog connects to a horizontal disc containing the pebbles, or in our case marbles, so that after each mile, a single marble drops through a hole.
There it goes. That's my marble. Look. There it is. I've done exactly a Roman mile. So obviously, when I paced it out, I was a few yards up, but it's not bad. After all, I did have my legs tied together, and I'm very close to my milepost. Now, I've just got 16 miles to do before I run out of marbles. I better get moving.
Over the ages, many scientists, including Leonardo da Vinci, have written off Vitruvius's fantastic machine as impossibly cumbersome. But there's no question the maths works, and odometers in our cars work on the same principle today. All in all, I believe machines like this could well have measured out roads 2,000 years ago. Hot on the heels of the legions and the bureaucrats came merchants from all corners of the Roman Empire. Hundreds of new items were imported, and many have been faithfully reproduced by Roman reenactors. Fine Samian pottery came from the Rhineland, where for the first time ever it was mass-produced by moulding. From the same region came elaborately decorated glassware. And all the way from Syria came jewellery made of amber and glass beads. Britons soon developed a taste for Roman delicacies. Merchant ships brought in thousands of amphorae filled with wine, olive oil, and a Roman speciality, fish sauce. But metal items were the most precious. Silver and gold jewellery, as well as tools and equipment made of bronze and iron.
They had to make all these metal things, so what they needed was the raw materials, the ores, and that is one of the principal reasons why the Romans came to Britain and stayed here for 400 years, because we had the raw materials. We had iron oxide, this is from Cumbria. We had tin, this is from Cornwall. We had copper, also from Cornwall, and if you mix the tin and the copper, you get bronze, which they used so much. We had lead, this is galena, lead sulfide, from the Mendip Hills, and of course they used that in their plumbing. The Latin for lead is plumbum. But even more important than those, the Roman economy was in trouble. They really needed to back it up, and that was one reason why they came looking for this stuff, gold. And that's why the Romans came here to South Wales, to Dolycothe in Carmarthenshire, because they knew there was gold in these here hills. Local tribes have been looking for gold in these hills for thousands of years, using very simple methods, just looking at the streams to see if they could see nuggets being washed down, or panning like this, swirling round the gravel and looking for little nuggets among the stones, like that, look. Unfortunately, it's only fool's gold, so I won't get very rich. When the Romans came, they scaled up the operation enormously by applying their engineering skills.
The Romans went straight for the seams of gold hidden in the hillside, but first they had to find them, using water.
Now the way to do that was to use the water to scour away all the earth and the trees off the hillside, and then that should reveal veins of gold. Here is my hillside, and here is my tank of water, ready to unleash millions of gallons. 1, 2, 3, open the sluice gates.
Once they'd stripped the hillside bare, Roman miners could easily follow the gold seams deep into the rock. The key to this technique was a water supply with the power to demolish whole hillsides. And there's evidence of just that, which the National Trust's archaeologist Emma Plunkett-Dillon showed me.
We're actually walking along what might appear to be a simple path, but if you look closely, it actually is an aqueduct. It travels 11 kilometres in length, the entire distance of the Cothi Valley. It starts right at the eastern end, where it traps the water from a stone-cut waterfall, travels all the way along the southern flank, picking up all the tributaries as they come down the slope towards the Cothi River in the bottom of the valley, and coming all the way along to where we are standing now.
You can actually see, if you look, now you've told me, that it's cut out here, isn't it?
Indeed.
And then there's a flat bit.
Yes.
And then the hillside slopes down really
Indeed.
quite steeply. So how do you know it was Roman?
We've been able to date some of these aqueducts, this one and the one higher up the hill, with radiocarbon dating. We've been able to say categorically that this particular aqueduct that we're walking along was built by the Romans.
Terrific.
Emma took me to the site of a tank, one of a series along the hillside. Its walls were cut into the rock, and the tank itself was over 20 metres long and 3 metres high. 2.5 million gallons a day flowed into the tank, and the huge sluice gates channeled it onto the hillside below. All that remained was to follow the seams by digging straight into the rock.
And you can still find the tunnels they dug in the hillsides. This is a genuine Roman entrance. The miners use picks like this one. It's quite a hefty lump of iron. And if you look carefully in the roof, you can still see the scratch marks made by those picks 2,000 years ago. It must have been a fantastically hard job. Just to cut this tunnel alone, they must have moved thousands of tons of rock by sheer brute force.
The Romans took the gold from this mine straight back to Rome, where it was made into precious jewellery or minted into coins by the treasury. I'd like to think that some of the gold might even have made its way back here, perhaps into the pockets of the soldiers and the engineers of Roman Britain.
Watch over on UK TV documentary next, from the Andes to the Amazon, while here with us, from fast food to gunpowder to silk, what the ancients of China did for us.